My name is Shauna, and I am the mama of a family of 4. We sold our 1,900 square foot home and moved into a 310 square foot camper full-time. We are a little over a year into this now, so stick around to see why we made this decision and how it has gone so far. Did we make a mistake? We are ready to share our story. I think you will find it interesting. This is 2 Kids in a Camper.
It's 2 kids and a camper. It's 2 kids and a camper. Living life is so much fun when you spend it with the ones you love. It's 2 kids and a camper. It's 2 kids and a camper.
Here we go, Chapter 1. This story really began years ago, even though we didn't know it at the time. We were just a typical small-town Midwestern family. Our daughter, Willa, was a toddler when we found out I was pregnant with our son, Otto. We both had really good jobs, and I had gone back to school for another degree to help further my career. I was driving to night classes an hour away a few nights a week for 2 years, which was a really difficult time in our lives, but we made it through. I ended up graduating just 2 months before Otto was born, which was good timing. July 15th, 2016 rolled around, and our lives were flipped upside down. All good things at first. Within the span of about an hour on that day, we purchased a home and our son was born. What a crazy story that is. But over the course of the next few weeks, things really began to take a turn, which ultimately led us to where we are today and why we really want to share our story. I won't go into the major details now. I will have a dedicated video for that in the future. I just really want to lay the groundwork for how we came to the conclusions for why we needed to uproot our lives in search of a better tomorrow. Within weeks of bringing Otto home, health issues began to arise. Illness after illness. He was also diagnosed with hip dysplasia not long after his birth, which landed him in a Pavlik harness for 6 weeks when he was just 2.5 months old. If you don't know what that is, it is a harness that wraps around up top and holds the legs up like a frog. We couldn't take it off for 6 weeks. We could only take one limb out at a time to do sponge baths. His first bout with pneumonia came a few weeks after he was released from the harness, just before Christmas as he was turning 5 months old. It was around that time that developmental delays really started to surface. We had no idea if these were just caused by all of the rough circumstances of his first few months of life or if something else was going on. And what made it worse was that we didn't agree. That is rough. 2017 continued to be rocky. So many doctor appointments, specialists, tests. We still didn't know what was going on. And by that July, Otto was admitted to the University of Iowa Children's Hospital a week before his first birthday to have an NG feeding tube placed. He had the NG tube for 16 months and has now had a G tube for almost 3 years. While he was in the hospital initially, though, we were able to do a DNA test. And let me tell you, those are not quick. Finally, in September, 2 months later, we got the call. We had some answers. Only we had to wait another 2 weeks for those in order to meet with the geneticist. Parents, if this ever happens to you, do not go doing a bunch of Google searches, especially if you don't know the full diagnosis. You will drive yourself even more crazy. I promise. Turns out, Otto has a genetic condition, a rare genetic condition, an ultra-rare genetic condition even. We won the genetic lottery, if you will. Otto has Hell's-Mortal-Van der Aa syndrome, or ADNP syndrome as it is more widely known, which is due to a mutation in or a deletion of the ADNP gene. This stands for Activity-Dependent Neuroprotective Protein Gene. He is one of just over 300 individuals worldwide now that have been diagnosed with this since its discovery in 2014, which was just 2 years before he was born. The next few years were filled with lots of doctor appointments, lots of illnesses, little sleep, slow development. Lots of bills, debt, working to live. But also came lots of love and so much joy. Otto emits joy. It is so powerful. I would say that is his superpower. That kid is a warrior. Even after throwing up, which happened all the time, daily, countless times. Or many doctor appointments, he would be all smiles, happy as can be. Watching him fight for every little bit of independence, whether it was just sitting on his own without falling over, sitting up from laying down, crawling, pulling up to standing, walking, incredible. I remember when he was about 2 and we were at a specialist appointment and he couldn't crawl yet. And they said, well, he may just never crawl. But he never gave up, and we didn't either.
There he goes.
It's just like, can I get it? Yay! Mommy! I don't.
Right there. Mark an X. That's our point. Oh my, look at him. And his big sis, she is amazing. She has been instrumental in us making it through all of this. She turned 4 just 3 weeks before Otto was born, and she has always been such a big helper. The bond those two share is amazing to watch. He absolutely loves his sis and is constantly following her around, getting into the middle of whatever she is doing. And he responds so much better to her whenever we are working with him on something. She is by his side often, cheering him on with new skills or holding class for him. She is so creative with everything she does. And like that, life moved on. There is no cure or specific treatment for a genetic disorder like this. You basically just treat symptoms as they arise. So the cycle continued, specialist appointments for this and that, therapies with our local AEA, lots of doctor appointments for illnesses, time off work to care for him. Not a ton of time to do fun things as a family. I think as parents, all anyone really wants is a great life for their kids. You work hard to provide for them, you try to do fun things as a family, maybe vacation sometimes. We didn't always get to do a lot of those things. I don't know how many times we had to skip something because Otto was sick, or the logistics of making something work was difficult with Otto's feeding schedule and the supplies we always had to have with us. It's so hard to see the sad look on Willa's face when some plans had fallen through, or we just can't make something work. But we sure did try whenever we could, and we are currently trying to make up for all of those lost moments. In the fall of 2019, Otto started preschool at the age of 3. I was so excited for him. Such hope for good things to come, great opportunities to learn and grow. We have a fantastic special education department at our school, and since I worked at the school, I was always right there if anything were to go wrong, and I could check in on him whenever I wanted. His classroom was only about 12 to 15 steps from my office door, which was perfect. That summer before he started school, he had remained fairly healthy, so I had high hopes for a better year to come. The winter prior wasn't too bad either. He had procedures done right before winter started that I think contributed. But I knew it was still going to be a bit of a juggling act. In August through November of that year, 2019, after he started school, didn't go too bad at first. A few minor illnesses, but otherwise okay. And then December rolled around. December 2019. He was almost 3.5 at this point. Long story short, Otto ended up being hospitalized for almost a week after complications due to RSV. There was a time there that I didn't think he would make it. That first night in the ER and the first day in the hospital The worst 24 hours I have ever experienced. He just continued to get worse. He was then transferred by ambulance to another hospital. We had to follow the ambulance since we were not allowed to ride along. Within a half hour of arriving at the new hospital, they started talking about transferring him again. The treatments were not making him better, and they could not intubate children there. I could see the news stories in my head. Another child succumbs to RSV this flu season, or something like that. Just a quick sad story that people would hear on the evening news. His hospital room at this point was full of doctors, nurses, x-ray techs, breathing specialists, all trying to help him. And all of a sudden, he woke up and started laughing. An alarm was going off on one of his machines, lights. He thought it was hilarious. I think everyone breathes at that moment, smiles all around. The treatment finally started to work, and his oxygen rebounded. It is hard to explain the feelings from that week. I would not wish that experience upon anyone. The stress and anxiety in the weeks and months that followed were awful. He was back into the spiral of illnesses, and every single time his oxygen would tank, regardless of the illness. I think in large part due to his lungs still not being healthy after having RSV. It takes some kids years to heal from that type of infection. So little sleep. I was like a hawk watching his O2 monitor night after night. We ended up with home oxygen, which was actually a blessing in disguise. I could sleep a small fraction of a bit better. But out of this came an overwhelming desire to do whatever it takes to make his life better, regardless of what that took. We drastically expanded the ideas of what that might take. But to do that meant digging into our lives, digging out of debt, improving every facet of our lives to create the best life that we could for all of us. Nate and I sit together almost every night and talk about all kinds of things. I remember one night in particular, he says, "What if we just get rid of everything in RV full time?" I didn't really know what to say. I just sat with it for a bit. Not only did he have plausible reasons why, but I was coming up with some of my own. I don't think he thought I would be so receptive to the idea. But after the time we spent with Otto in the hospital, we knew something needed to change. We could not continue with the awful cycle that was taking us all down. And one of the main reasons we came up with was getting Otto out of the cold, dry winters of Iowa. It was not good for him. Going south made sense. And what better way to do it than in an RV? That is our house on wheels. We could take our home anywhere, even Iowa City for our stretches of specialist appointments. No hotel needed. This is a channel that I hope will become a testament about living, being at peace with the cards that you've been dealt and soaking up those special moments, no matter how small. About not being afraid to live your life to the fullest and cherishing every day as if it is our last. Any one of us could be gone tomorrow. So we want to focus on creating those memories we will all be able to look back on someday with smiles on our faces. The good days and the bad days all create a beautiful story. And we will hopefully have these videos forever. Live your life. Figure out what matters. Always have a goal to work towards, even if it's small. Life seems to have a way of pushing you one direction or another. Finally, after months of discussion, trying to keep Otto healthy brings us to the end of February 2020. I was home with Otto again after he came down with influenza B and metapneumovirus within a week of each other and landed him with pneumonia yet again. We could see what was coming with coronavirus, and we knew we could not take a chance with an infection with his weakened lungs, especially since there was still not much known at that point about the new virus. So on March 2nd, 2020, we chose not to send Willa back to school. That was hard. Not only could she not go back and say goodbye to her friends, but we knew that we would not be seeing any family members for the foreseeable future. My parents and brothers all live in the same town that the school was located in. We were so lucky to be able to stop all the time to see them. It was months before we saw them again face to face. 2 weeks into March and schools were closed everywhere. I think everyone has stories about how that went for their families. Heartache all around. And Nate was the only one going in and out of the house to go to work, to pick up grocery orders. He drives a semi, and he doesn't come into contact with people regularly. Luckily, after I had emailed our school with our concerns, they were willing to work with me on keeping the kids home, and also myself working from home from then on. But I knew that I was giving up my position. I would not be taking over the lead spot in the business office after that. Something I had been working towards for years and was really looking forward to. In fact, I knew my time with the school was numbered. I loved my job. I loved the ladies I worked with. They were amazing, both personally and professionally. I had always pictured myself working in that office until I retired, watching my kids go through school with me right by their side. And very quickly, I had to shatter the future I had envisioned for us. I have mourned the loss of that several times. But at the same time, I was so excited for the future we were beginning to build. It was incredibly draining work. On top of keeping up with the kids, remaining part-time with the school, maintaining regular housework, I was working through piles and boxes of stuff, throwing and donating whatever we could. Nate and I had been together for 17 years at that point and had lived together for 16. We moved 10 different times in those 16 years, and we always left so much stuff in boxes. So every time we moved, there was more and more stuff, all still in boxes. Makes sense? Little by little, though, we made progress. We also began working on the house to get it ready for sale. After cleaning out areas, I was painting and deep cleaning. We acquired the camper in March, so I also began moving things we needed to the camper so we could transition out there and start getting used to the smaller space, knowing we would eventually be loaded down with everything we would need for the winter. It was challenging. We've probably reorganized everything at least a dozen times since we moved in. At first, we just slept out there every night, and then in late August, more full-time once we moved the camper to another property. We still came back almost every day, though, to work on the house. Nate was still working full-time, so he would help every night after he got home with whatever he could. He spent a ton of time those first few months just making sure we had everything we would need to travel south once we had everything done. So much planning went into our rig. Hours upon hours of research, almost exclusively by Nate. Some of the things he came up with, I couldn't even understand until he had things assembled. It is amazing the way his mind works. We will walk you through all of that setup in due time. Stay tuned for that. So after lockdown began, once the weather was cooperating, we tried to get outside for walks or play on the swing set whenever we could. On one of those walks, we discovered a beautiful property not far from our house that was for sale. After weeks of talking and a large price drop on the property, we decided it would be a great place to call our home site. We could park our camper while we were in Iowa and store things after selling our house. So we put in an offer. I was very excited with the potential and knew we would have such a great view off of our deck while parked there. Isn't that beautiful? The only problems were, we knew the small house was not salvageable. And the property was previously owned by what you would probably say was a hoarder. The yard was so full of junk, overrun by weeds and vines and overgrowth. The good thing was, the garage was salvageable, but it needed a ton of work. So our to-do list grew even larger. Many times we thought, what did we get ourselves into? As hard as it was, I always did my best to stay positive, which can be tricky because Nate tends to be a pessimist, or a realist as he calls it. We worked our butts off downsizing, working on the house to get it ready for sale, working on the property to get it camper ready, fixed the garage to get it storage ready, moved every last bit of our stuff over to the property we were keeping. Oh my gosh, so much stuff we had to go through. Got the camper and rig ready to roll, which we almost didn't make it out at the last minute because of a solar issue. Keeping the kids up with school, Nate working full-time, myself working part-time, and trying to keep some semblance of organization to all the chaos around. But we made it. I knew we would. On the morning of December 10th, 2020, 1 year and a day from when Otto was released from the hospital, we gave our farewells to my family. We grabbed our last few things from the house, said one last goodbye to it, as that was the last time we set foot inside. Grabbed the last few things from the property we needed, offloaded some things we didn't, all mad dash style, which tends to be how we live our lives usually. Put our house up for sale, and we headed south, being chased by the cold all the way down. It did not want to let us go. No. And finally, 2 kids in a camper was born. What a crazy feeling. It is hard to describe. I don't know how many times we asked ourselves, like, are we really doing this? Like, this is happening right now? It took a really long time for it to sink in. A really long time. Now you may be asking, how did Otto do up to that point after his awful winter? He did a complete 180. Once his lungs had more time to heal, he thrived over the summer, growing and getting stronger. From mid-March until we left in December, he only had 2 minor colds in the fall. Did not have to visit the doctor, no antibiotics needed, no supplemental oxygen needed. His numbers dipped, but he held his own. So it was obvious he was getting stronger all around. He had never had a run of health that long in his life. Over 9 months, doctor visit free. That is seriously unheard of. We all had physicals before we left, and he was finally registering on the percentile chart for weight. He was typically at the 5th percentile or below for his age, like below the chart sometimes. Negative, if you will. And how did Willa do in the latter half of 2020? I think it is probably the hardest on her. Not being able to see all the people she loved, so many changes happening all at once. Watching her mom and dad work like crazy, nonstop, it seemed at times. But she handled it like a trooper. Always coming up with fun things for her and Otto to do, helping me with whatever she could, making me sit down at times just to relax while she pampered me. But she was excited for our adventures ahead. I tell you what, if there is one thing you should be teaching your kids, it's resiliency. Life is hard, and you never know when you might get knocked down. But if you can teach your kids how to work through adversity, not give up when bad things happen or life doesn't go as planned, they will be much better people for it. So why did we uproot our lives? For the health of our son and mental well-being of our family as a whole, to set up an avenue for Otto to lead a rich and fulfilling life, knowing very well that we might have him with us for the rest of our lives, but at the same time fighting for every inch of growth we can for him. To get rid of every expense we could so we could work towards climbing out of debt. To avoid spending large chunks of our lives just tending to so much stuff that holds no meaning or value, and saving money that would have otherwise been spent on said pointless stuff. To avoid excessive time spent on cleaning and upkeep of a home that is largely used to house stuff. to open up avenues to visit doctors and therapy anywhere should we need to in the future, to spend more time as a family, making great memories while we can, and appreciating the little things in life with our kids while they are growing up, to have the ability to visit family for extended periods of time, all from the comfort of our home, when it was otherwise nearly impossible to travel places for any meaningful length of time, to choose how to educate our kids, to open up the possibility of traveling this beautiful country and developing a deep love for the outdoors, and to teach them that there are other ways to navigate life. It's not a cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all sort of situation. I said it before, and I will say it again. Be resilient. If you have made it this far into the video, I applaud your dedication and appreciate your time and attention. I challenge you to think of something in your life, big or small, that you can change to work towards a better life for yourself. Maybe it's just something you're putting off, or something that drives you crazy, causes a lot of stress or anxiety, or something you've wanted to learn to do. Maybe it is something holding you back from the life you want to live. Or maybe you are just working towards a life that you think will make you happy, but in the end is just empty. What could you do to change that thing? Give it some thought. Be creative. Put some goals in place. Ask for help when you need to. Please ask for help when you need to. Don't put it off any longer. Reprioritize your life if you have to. You only get one chance on this planet, and working towards being a better person or creating a happier life for yourself or your family is not a bad way to go. Even if it's small, you gotta start somewhere. But the most important thing is that you start. Look, we are not perfect people. No one is. We just want to share our story and maybe shine a little light in a world that has a lot of sadness right now. Bring some hope and maybe a little comedy to the families out there that are like us and struggle with so much weight on their shoulders every day. Sometimes a leap of faith is needed. Will we find ourselves at the bottom of a dark hole? Who knows? But we are living our lives. So join in on the journey with us. Let's see how this goes. Did I also mention that we will have some music coming your way in the somewhat near future? That will be fun. And that brings us to the end of chapter 1. Want to see what happens on our maiden voyage south? Well, hit that subscribe button and come on back for chapter 2. Until then, take care. This is so weird. This is awful. We are a little into a year over this. Take 20. Can you hear him in the background? Such big. So after a lot. I hear something behind me. Otto's having a good time. The squirrels are going crazy. The squirrels are over here are making so many crazy noises. So, I promise it's gonna get better as it goes. So, stick around.